Welcome to the Hive Stream 33. The Hive is brought to you by Esports College and Career Pathways, where our mission is to provide a safe and supportive environment for gamers to pursue their goals. We focus on diversity, equality, and inclusion. Huge thank you to our sponsors, Corsair, GameHers, ESTV, and NFL alumni. I'm your guest host today, Nick S. Tonight we'll have a great program and a new program format. Every week we will be either highlighting teams playing against each other, important topics, or just getting together, playing with the community to have fun, friendly games on stream. Tonight we'll be focusing on how to become a freelance writer in the esports industry, which brings us to our guest, Robin Mosley. Robin is a freelance game writer for Nerd Street Gamers, where she covers gaming and esports from a diversity, equality, and inclusion perspective by centering diverse voices. Robin's written about gaming in Wired, Kotaku, The Mary Sue, and more. Currently, Robin is a Vox Media Workshop Fellow and is reporting on esports and college career outcomes. She holds a master's degree in journalism from DePaul University and a PhD from the University of Illinois. When she isn't writing about gaming and esports, she is a career coach full-time. Hi Robin, welcome to the stream.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for having me.
It's glad to have you here. Right, so first things first. How did you start in gaming?
That's a loaded question, but I have to take it all the way back to when I was a young kid. So I have two older brothers, a younger brother as well, but the two older brothers, they're 7 and 9 years ahead of me. And so I grew up with pretty much every system you can think of, from the Nintendo, the original Nintendo Entertainment System, all the way up to the current gen. The only two systems I think we didn't have was the Sega Saturn, and then also the Nintendo GameCube. But pretty much we had everything. I was pretty much a passive backseat gamer for a good chunk of my life, only because I was totally afraid to play certain games. So I would watch my older siblings pretty much play Mario, Sonic. Their favorite things were fighting games. So I got to see Killer Instinct and Mortal Kombat, and obscure fighting games like Bloody Roar. For those who don't know what that is, it's on the PlayStation. Really great game. And then I started to also see my second oldest brother play RPG games, which eventually got me super into video games because it had a narrative aspect to it. I could be someone different for a long extended period of time. And then also I just had the opportunity to just explore worlds that was very much outside of my own experience. That eventually led me to Kingdom Hearts. Big game, loved it. I was still very young, a kid when that came out. And I remember hearing the music by Utada Hikaru, and I fell in love with the music and the game. Still, I couldn't play the game as a kid. I was too afraid to. It was just monsters and things. I just couldn't do it, even though it was Disney
I was gonna
focused.
say
I
it's
couldn't.
Disney. Is that not me?
No, the Heartless scared me. I was over it. But I think part of that, not to dig deep into my psyche, but I think part of it was when you're growing up with two older siblings who play games constantly and they're good at them, or at least in my eyes they were. You don't necessarily see the mistakes they made. You only see the end result, the fact that they actually beat the game, and they're done with that game, and now they're moving to the next one. So I internalized that for a long time and just said, you know what, maybe I'm not good at games and maybe I don't want to try it. And of course, both of my brothers would hand me the controller and say, try it, but I was afraid to do it. So, long story short, we get back to Kingdom Hearts, and I refused to play it, was never going to play it, did not happen. I was afraid. But I would say the first RPG game I played that literally just changed my life and made me become a gamer is actually Final Fantasy X. My favorite by far of the Final Fantasies, although I will say the remake of 7 is pretty darn good. So, nevertheless, 10 was what opened up my world to RPGs. Gaming, all that immersive stuff. And then next thing you know, I just said, you know what, this is for me. I do love gaming. I'm not somebody who's going to play fighting games. I know a lot about them, but RPGs are for me. Action, adventure, all of those games. And then next thing you know, I'm here writing about them.
Wow. So with those two big brothers, I bet were you the one that always had to play on the terrible third controller or whatever it was?
No, no. I was far too smart for that. So I just think I grew up with a whole family that didn't do that. I did that to my cousins, which made them really mad. So I did that to them, but I was very aware of, oh, if you give me a controller that's not hooked up to a computer, a console, I knew that this wasn't a real thing. But it didn't matter to me because for me, I think watching my brothers play lent me very well to watching other people play and then being able to talk about that stuff as well. Because as a passive player, you are able to look at the intricacies of what's going on, and not necessarily in your head about what you need to achieve in order to pass a certain level. So for me, it became an easy process for me. But yeah, I was definitely not the kid with the second controller. They were very much tough love people that told me, if you want to be better at a video game, here's the controller, get your behind whooped. And if you don't like it, then pass the controller to somebody who wants to play. And I would pass it along to this day. So they might have a reason why I don't like competitive gaming at all. Like to talk about it, can't play without breaking out into sweats.
Well, you've spoken a little about some of your obstacles in gaming, but do you have any more that you want to tell us about that you had to face in gaming?
Oh, well, as a gamer, so to be clear again, not competitive gamer, but as just somebody who loves playing them, I think the biggest thing is having the time to finish them. Then it's also the bigger issue of accessibility to video games. And so I recently completed Final Fantasy VII Remake, loved it. Waited until I could get a PS5 to play it because I didn't want to play it on my old rickety PS4. Enjoyed everything about it. And then I am a completionist. And so you can't complete like the full upgraded weapons of the characters that you play with unless you beat it on hard mode. Hard mode for me is not necessary. It's not a necessary thing in order to prove that you can play a game. And so, in a way, it makes it where I have to use more brain power. I have to struggle through a game and learn patterns in order to fulfill a need that I need in life, which is to complete a game to 100%, which drives me insane. So I think that's another issue. And then it's really the diving into gaming as it relates to mental health. And so you typically will find some people will play games for hours and hours and hours. I used to be that kind of player. I cannot do that anymore, not only because I have a full-time job, but also I feel like being immersed in those worlds for far too long is a little unhealthy for me, because once I get obsessed with certain things when I play it too long. And so for the sake of my life, it's better to just let that go. But if we take it even a little broader, when I think about gaming and then game writing, biggest issue is really when I am writing things not necessarily for Nerd Street, but when I'm writing for, and not even Wired, I didn't come across that with Wired or Kotaku, in fact, but other spaces where there are white men who are in charge of being the editor, editor in chief, and there's not a lot of women. So when I pitch certain topics about race in gaming or my experiences as a backseat gamer, and then overcoming stress and anxiety behind it, those stories get denied because they don't understand it, because a real gamer pushes through, and those kind of stories kind of get pushed to the side, and you don't get the chance to actually talk about them. So I think those are really the biggest issues I've had, is just really on the actual gaming side, dealing with stress and trying to overcome obstacles within gaming with accessibility, and the idea of what's worth the struggle. It makes you a better gamer with playing hard mode versus just being able to enjoy the game leisurely and still complete things to 100%. And then in gaming, game writing, just really dealing with when you're pitching ideas, having people say that your ideas aren't worth it, when in actuality they really are. It's just their perspective of what gaming is incorrect, in my opinion.
Yeah, it should be inclusive. I think. Um, um, you and I'm also like you. I love to play the games just on the easiest mode and enjoy it for the story.
Yes.
That's what it is. Unless it's a music game, then I've got fast fingers. So, um,
Oh, that definitely used to be me. I can't do that anymore. I don't know what's up with my brain, but back in the day, and I know the website's still up, but back in the day, I used to play Flash Revolution with my keyboard and every. I was so good at it. I can't do it anymore. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just I need to build that back up. But that, and then I think Dance Dance Revolution was on PlayStation 2 as well. I used to play that too. So those were my games back in the day. Music, and I could talk about music games all day, honestly. Just really quickly, one of the games that I used to play growing up, actually, that was competitive, that I felt okay with playing, was Bust a Groove, 1 and 2, which I don't think anybody really knows what those games are, but they're essentially like fighting games, but they're dance fighting games. Would play with my brother, my second older brother, all the time. Only I didn't beat him ever. Never could do it, but I tied with him once. I'll never let that go. I tied with him once in a game, and then quit playing it because I knew I wasn't going to be able to beat him in it or top that.
well, I know what it was. So
Oh,
maybe that's just
awesome.
because I'm a big music game nerd as well. So,
That's nice to know you're not the only person in the world who plays that game, or at least knows what it is. Because when I bring it up, I feel like I'm just like talking to a brick wall.
well, you're not. I'm listening. You spoke a little bit about your writing. How
Yes.
did you become interested in writing in the first place?
Oh, another loaded question, but one that I'll try to do my best to take you all back to. Oh, okay. So I graduated with my PhD. Thought I was going to do something with that other than being a professor. And so I did. I went into higher education, realized I don't really want to do this anymore. It's not my passion. I'm going to figure out what that is. Fortunately, in grad school and throughout my entire educational career, I was super interested in careers in itself. So figuring that out, understanding where you fit and you want to be in the future, and because of that, I just took some space and some time to figure out, okay, well, what do I want to do? How do I want to use my research background, and then also my interest in practical writing um, elsewhere. And so I decided to apply for graduate school for journalism. What I realized really early on is that because I'm a lot older than The undergrad people that, I mean, I was a grad program, but a lot of the people I was around in my editing situations were undergrads. I realized that there's no way that I will have the opportunity to do internships, especially unpaid ones in journalism, which is very notorious. But I already knew that there was no way I would be able to do any internships, any prestigious internships, because simply put, those are full time, but they don't pay full time benefits and they're temporary opportunities. And so I had to start freelancing literally as soon as I got into my program. Fortunately for me, I already knew in the beginning I wanted to do food writing. I still love food writing. I love food, so that will never change. But I knew, hey, I have to figure out how to do this, and so I started in a place that I tell people to never go, which is content mills. Low pay, they work you to the bone. Sometimes they will have you write, 3,000 words for like $15. But I needed to figure out what that process was and how to navigate this industry and know what is really crappy publications and or not. After that, I still did content mills, but I still wanted the opportunity to build up my portfolio with writing. So I went to Upwork. That's still a content mill to me. But people don't always see it that way. Totally fine if you don't, still works. But for me, I did it. And then eventually I had enough clips where I said, you know what, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. Let me apply to quote unquote legitimate companies. And so then I was still in food. Next thing you know, I'm like, let's do something else. And that actually came about, I think, I'm trying to remember the date, maybe October of 2020, where I realized, you know what, I want to do something different. And it actually was in one of my classes that I loved, which was long form journalism. And so essentially, I said, up to that point, food writing was a thing that I was doing. I didn't want to necessarily give that up, but I was being pulled towards gaming. I'm like, I want to do this, I want to write about it. And then next thing you know, I said, you know what, this is the project that I'm going to write about. And the project was essentially interviewing content creators for The Sims 4, Black young content creators. So they're all Gen Z. Yeah, I was gonna say Gen X. That means they would be older than me, but Gen Z. And really, if you don't know the core issue with The Sims 4, which I'm a huge Sims fan, which was also another game I played quite a bit as a kid, but if you don't know, a lot of the content that is created by EA and Maxis, well, I think it's more so EA than Maxis, and I don't think Maxis is attached to them anymore. But EA in particular is that they were having issues with skin color not really matching the variety and diversity of Black people. This was also happening to other people of color, but I'll specifically speak on Black people. So the hair wasn't right. There really wasn't any thought process into the clothing design or what it really means to be a Black person in the US specifically. So I decided to interview three wonderful young creators who were creating what we would call in the Sims community alpha content, which is like super hyper realized stuff that makes your Sims look like real people. And then eventually I pitched that to Wired. First time pitching to Wired, super excited to do it, afraid to do it, but it got picked up. And I had the opportunity to get that published. And then from there, it just really took off where I tried to publish as much as I can in writing. And then next thing you know, I get to Nerd Street, and they wanted somebody with esports, and I'm like, well, the only esports I know is Call of Duty. I don't play Call of Duty, and I know that because I don't like competitive playing at all. I said it's a pattern. I don't like playing that, but I know a lot about it because I've seen tons of it. My husband plays it. It's been playing it since. I mean, I've known him, so I know a lot about it. So it said, okay, breaking into game writing as a permalancer, so a permanent freelancer, I knew I had to do something, so I went ahead and sent in my application. I heard back, and then I learned that they were actually interested in bringing me on to talk about gaming in general, not just esports. And I'm like, oh, thank you, because then it gives me the opportunity to talk about a lot of stuff that people don't actually learn about or hear about, and it's been a blessing, and then also a really incredible opportunity to just grow my experience.
So it sounds like you really found a good home there at Nerd Street in the end. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing there. And I think one of the things is that, I brought up earlier where when you pitch things for certain places, you don't get the chance to actually have a voice or write about what you want. And to be honest, being a part of Nurse Street, it's been incredible because I don't have to fight to get diverse perspectives or fight to get certain things to be talked about. As long as it's within the parameters of gaming and esports, I get to run wild with incredible ideas that I have.
Okay. Um, and earlier on, you were talking a little bit how everybody wasn't represented correctly in
Hmm.
some games. Do you have
Hmm.
any developers to mind that you think do properly represent um, everyone?
Ooh, that's really difficult because the answer is really no. Like there's no one developer that's going to get it right. And then in some ways, I don't know if you can unless it's almost like a simulation game, where you can create your own person, but in actual, like, if we talk about Call of Duty, for example, yes, there are women in the game. There are Black women in the game, right? There are many different people of different shades and colors and all of that. But at the end of the day, you that is just an avatar. So can you make them queer? That's not really a part of the story, right? So it really depends on the developer, but I have yet to see one that can do that effectively. And to be honest, I don't know if that's even the right thing to do. Simply because somebody, when you're not of that perspective, that identity, it's a little strange for you to try to take on doing something like that if you can't do it effectively. So sometimes it's important just make sure that if you don't have the background, the knowledge, or the talent to do that, that you step away and you do not handle that. Or better yet, you hire consultants, actual people that are of that background who have that experience to help guide you or just give them the chance to do that work themselves. So I think it's a hard thing to say, can has somebody done it, and then also this idea of should they do it? They should, but there's some caveats to it.
Yeah, like yeah, I agree. They should try their hardest, but it is very hard. Um, who inspired you? That's is that an easy one for you?
Oh wow, that's such a hard question because I don't know. That's a hard. That's the first time I think I've heard someone ask me that because I don't know.
Maybe
I'll say off the top of my head, the first person would probably be my grandmother, but she wouldn't think of any of this because she's old. Well, she was old. She passed, unfortunately. But
sorry.
her thought process is just very much like you could do whatever it is that you want to do. You don't let anybody tell you that you can't. And so that kind of mantra has been a part of my life pretty much forever. She's always been the person to say that to me and push me to do whatever it is that I thought I could do. So that would be it, but, like, for gaming, I can't say anybody influenced me other than myself. I had to put that belief system in me to believe that I can actually do this work effectively, and it just takes a lot of self-speech that I typically do every day of just talking to myself about, "Here's my plans, here's where I wanna go, here's what I wanna do," and then actually figuring out how to do it. I will say, educationally, my professor, the person that I've had the most classes with, which she doesn't realize maybe that she's a huge influence on me, but Amy Merrick, who was a huge inspiration on my writing, pushed me to do a lot more, to think differently, to expand my knowledge in the way that I go about writing. So I'll say on the writing side that, but then just gaming, I can't think of anybody but myself that pushed me there.
Ah, well, I suppose you were saying earlier you had your big brothers that got you into gaming a little bit, so
Yeah,
I can
no,
understand
that's
that.
not an
Yeah,
inspiration. They were
no.
not an inspiration. No, not at all. Like they, it was complete opposite for me. Where I'm like, I think
Oh
they're part
dear.
of the reason why I run away from certain types of games where I just sweat, pits, just everything is just growth. I cannot play certain things because of them. So I would say no, just the complete opposite. I will say that if I didn't have older siblings, I cannot say that I would be the gamer that I am because I have such a vast knowledge of so many video games that are quote unquote considered old school and older than me. So I feel like I can just look at a game and I'm like, oh, I can connect this to something old, or I've seen all kinds of genres of video games because of them. But inspirations to get into gaming, maybe indirectly, I'll give them that. I'll give them that.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about your path to becoming a professional writer. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on to there, and onto there? And also, you spoke a little bit about your Nerd Street and
Hmm.
how it felt, writing for there, writing, what you want to write. Um, how did you get involved with Vox Media as well? Like
Hmm.
with that, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so how I got, well, the advice I would give other people, I should say. If you're interested in writing about gaming, the biggest thing I could say is one, please read any place that's writing about gaming so you'll understand their voice and what they're looking for. One of the biggest issues with writers, especially if you're starting out and you're trying to pitch a brand, so Kotaku, Wired, Input, Inverse, any of these spaces that write about gaming, you need to know what they write about, what their area of writing is all about as well. So, Nerd Street, for example, esports is mostly what they talk about. I am the outlier because I write about general gaming, but they are mostly known for esports. If you go to Kotaku, you'll find a wide variety of information on video games. And then if you go to places like Wired, you'll see that there are very niche areas of video games that they're willing to talk about. And so you need to know what each place is looking for. And then when you know that, and you need to understand this as well, is that you have to come up with the pitch, an actual area that you want to talk about and not necessarily a topic. So, for example, if we're talking about diversity in gaming, I could talk about diversity in gaming, where Black women aren't represented in RPGs, right? That's a topic, but that's not really something that's going to sell them on actually letting me write about it. And so you need to figure out, okay, well, what about Black women in RPGs in terms of having no visibility? What's the angle? And so you always have to have an angle with that. And then the last thing I would say is just be very fearless with trying to do this. When you pitch to any space, you will get denied. It is normal. I've been denied plenty of times. I will continue to be denied when you're pitching topics. That doesn't mean that your idea for what you want to write is awful. Doesn't mean that it sucks. It just means that maybe that publication has one, written about it already, or two, it doesn't fit the kind of reader that they have. And so that's why I said it's important to read. In terms of Vox, so I came across this opportunity to get some experience working with a brand that I love, a brand that I would love to publish with. And so I saw it. I said, you know what? It's not going to hurt me to try to jump on this opportunity. And and try to learn from somebody who works for Polygon. I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Let's figure it out. So I applied for it. Didn't think I was going to get it, to be completely honest. It's a crapshoot when you apply for anything related to workshops and fellowships in journalism. It's very cutthroat. I have a ton of experience already, but I already knew that there's a possibility that I'll get a no. And that's okay. That's totally fine. I ended up getting it. Super excited. I learned that there was like 500 people who applied, and I was one of 30 who got it. And I'm like, okay, this is really awesome. And now I'm working under an editor at Polygon to write about esports and careers, all connected to the stuff that I already have some experience with. Of course, as I said earlier, I'm a career coach and I've worked in career services and higher education. And I graduated without an idea what I wanted to do in life, both in undergrad and after my PhD. So I've been very cognizant of understanding pathways and understanding how to get people where they want to go. And I want to essentially explore, does college really help students get the esports positions that they're interested in moving forward? How diverse are they? What are their issues? And what can they do in order to support the pipeline of increasing people of color, and also people of color who are also queer people of color, I should say. People with disabilities as well. Everybody under the sun that is marginalized, I want them to be seen and heard in video games. And so, yeah, so that's basically how I got to Vox, and not done with the program yet, but love it so far.
Yeah, well, I think you've made some amazing. You've done amazing. From what
I try.
like, I was really impressed when I read all the things that you've done so far and saw everything. So it's really good. Um, but going back to like when you first started, who was your
Mhm.
first interview?
Oh,
Do they have a special place in
I
your heart for
remember.
that, or
I'm
was
trying to remember what my first article was. Honestly, I would have to look it on my website. I've done so many at this point that I can't remember. Hmm. Yeah, I don't remember at
okay?
all, but I could say what the most, well, maybe no, that wasn't it. I don't remember, but I'll say what the most memorable one
Okay.
was, which was actually talking about energy. Well, there's actually two that I'll talk about, but NRG, so NRG Esports. It's a esports company in LA, built a huge esports castle for content creators. I got the opportunity to talk to two people, specifically one that I already knew about before because I've watched their stuff. Point Crow, big in speed running. I'm a huge speed run person, actually. I love it. Don't do it myself. I'll pick it up eventually. It is something that I want to do, but loved it. Absolutely love the inner workings of how some people create challenges around the most mundane games, or I wouldn't call them mundane, but the most, I don't even want to call that simplistic. It's just they create these incredible challenges around games that you can play and you're thinking, well, there's nothing else you can do with this game, but then you'll find something. So for example, he is a variety streamer, but he's very much known um, known for, I should say, his Breath of the Wild gameplay. And so he'll play a game, create a challenge playing with the idea that the floor is lava, for example. And so you can't touch the ground. It's strange, or trying not to get hit at all, or the one he brought up, which was incredibly strange to me, but I believe it can be done because he's done it. Is doing it blindfold, playing the entire game blindfold. So mapping out the entire game of Breath of the Wild, which is such a fast game, and beating it.
Well,
Don't know how you can do things like that, but my mind is always blown by it. And then the other one was Power Up with Pride, which was actually a recent article that I did, and I really wanted to make sure that I highlight queer gamers in these spaces, because not that it's not happening, it's just that I feel like it's not being done as much as I would love it to be. So having the opportunity to speak to people who've created an incredible speed running community and speed running marathon, and then having them walk through the process. I think one of the biggest things, I'll just leave it here with this particular question, but one of the biggest things I love to do is sort of demystify certain things for people. So I'm often asking questions about, how did you do this? So that when people are reading it, they'll realize, oh, this is something that I can do too. Yes, it's going to take a lot of work. Yes, I'm not going to know what I'm doing immediately, but I can tell from what I see in this writing that this is something that I'm interested in, and this is something that's within reach.
I love those crazy speedruns that you were talking about earlier. I always love those crazy categories that you can get. They're so interesting. And I myself, I do a little bit of video game QA, so I'm interested in all those glitches and bugs and stuff that they find.
I don't know how people do it, honestly. Like, it that stuff takes a lot of time, and then you have to really, I don't know if you have to love the game. I think if you're one of those people who love the technical parts of just finding things, by all means, great. But I feel like in order for me to do something like that, I would need to know the game like the back of my hand, and then also be willing to play it over and over and over again. I don't know if I have the mental strength to do that. So everybody, including yourself, who do that, you all are amazing. I no, I will be the backseat gamer and just watch and be in awe.
um, let's take it back a little bit more
Yep.
to your writing. What's the
Mhm.
hardest part about becoming a writer? Would you say?
Oh, it's not even the writing, honestly. After a while, you get very used to different publication voices and what they're looking for and what you're expected to do. That's not the problem. The big issues usually pay. When you're starting out, especially if you have no experience writing at all, you have a lot of confidence issues, potentially, I will say, at least it was for me. And you're trying to figure out, okay, how much am I supposed to charge, or how much am I supposed to advocate for myself for certain types of money? I remember when I started off in food writing for a defunct website, I was getting paid for 3,000 words, maybe $100, and that's really low. And that means I had to do a lot of research. I had to write it all out, and this was like 2 articles per week, actually. So this was 6,000 words a week, and I didn't make it very long. Maybe I think like 2 months, and I realized, you know what, this is really crappy. So the money will be the biggest issue in the beginning if you aren't aware that you can get a lot of money. I'll be transparent. For the articles that I wrote for Wired, I got paid $500, like that per article. So I'm like, that's really awesome. So it's important to just make sure that you know where to go to get paid, and then recognize that you deserve to be paid for the work that you do. The other thing I'll say about writing and what's hard is also probably the editing process. In the beginning, when you're writing this, you're you're gonna think of your writing as, I don't want to say like it's a baby or anything, but it's yours, and you are very critical about it and you hold on to it. But an editor will shred your stuff apart to the point where you may feel like, oh my gosh, can I write? Am I terrible at this? What am I doing? And you'll realize very soon that it's not about the fact that, or the idea that you can't write. It's more so they need to edit you in the way that their publication needs. And it'll make you sound as good as possible to make sure that you get published. And then I guess the last thing I'll say about what's hard about writing is probably just juggling full-time work and also trying to write on the side. If you are somebody who's trying to do this part-time with a very demanding job, it is super difficult to manage interviewing, transcribing, writing, then editing all of that beforehand, and then re-editing when the editor looks at your stuff. And if you are pumping out a bunch of articles like I am a month, you will be tired. So it could get pretty difficult.
Yeah. Um, so we spoke a little bit about those articles that you
Mhm.
were pretty proud of, the noteworthy ones that you picked out before. Is there any other ones that you are, or is that the ones that you are most proud of? And what is your favorite subject to write about? Is it, is it the
Ooh,
game stuff? I know you talked a little about your food writing as well, or is it more of the diversity aspect?
I think it's the diversity. So I'll take a step back and answer the first part of the question. What's my favorite article? I think the one that I keep thinking about the most is my other Wired article about mental health and helping people take a break from video games and learning when stuff gets too tough or it's something that you are unable to beat and complete, or you are nervous to play online because of harassment and things like that, or you are struggling to build a community of people around you to make you feel safe as a gamer. Just learning how to navigate that. And so I had the opportunity to interview, I believe, about 5 or 6 industry leaders in psychology, psychiatry, and therapy who basically was willing to walk me through, well, here's what we would tell our clients, and here's what you need to keep in mind as you navigate the place of gaming. And then what was the other part of your question? I'm sorry, I forgot that part.
Your favorite subject to write about?
Oh, favorite. Yeah, so diversity is one of them, but I think my favorite is probably speed running. I it's just it's what I love. I can't help but to talk about speed running. I got into speed running, at least watching it, GDQ 2014. And that really goes back to watching my older siblings playing video games. So the backseat gamer thing, it comes full circle for me. And I was watching them play games. I think the first game, I think my mind was blown. I don't want to say it was Mario. I was very shocked by that, but the one where I think I was like, oh my gosh, like how did they do this? Is another obscure game, which is Rocket Knight Adventures on the Sega Genesis. Something that my older brother used to play consistently, and it would take him at least like an hour and 30 to play, but it took like the gamer like what I think like 30 minutes to play it, and it blew my mind. So I was just like, how is this possible? So this is all to say, anything with speed running, anything with diversity within speed running is something of interest. My next goal is to just do a little more research, and hopefully I can find some women of color who are speed runners, and talk to them about their experiences, because what I've found is that I could find a lot of white men who play games and speed run, but I cannot find a lot of women of color who speed run, and that's just probably because I don't have the time to just search and do all of the research that I need to. But that really is the goal, is to write about that next.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that Games Done Quick got you into that
Yeah,
speedrun and stuff. Such a good watch. Whenever they're
it
on Twitch,
is.
it is. I won't keep you too much longer, so we're almost out of time. But what advice would you give to gamers who are interested in becoming a writer?
Ooh, the biggest things, other than what I brought up earlier about having pitches and knowing the publication, if you have an area of gaming that you know well, like the back of your hand, like for example, for me, that's Sims. Like that's a whole entire area that I could talk about on end. If you have a certain area that you know very well, that you can have a discussion about, whether it's about personal narratives that you want to write about your experiences with the game, or if you want to do more reported features, where you're interviewing people who are playing within those games, and have a certain angle to it, that works. So basically, have a beat. Know what it is that you like to write about within gaming, and then start thinking about new stories, ideas that you can then extrapolate on and write many different things about. There's nothing wrong with you having one idea and then using that as a basis of everything else you'll do with your writing. I think of that within diversity and equity inclusion, where I'm like, well, that's like the basis of every article that I write. I might be writing about different things, but that has to be clear in everything that I write, that there's some type of angle with diversity in it. And so I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing. Find a beat, feel okay with doing that, and then just start pitching ideas to places and pitch early and often. You'll find that eventually you'll get a yes, and then next thing you know, your career, similar to mine, will take off with writing.
Wow. You gave us some really good insight and advice today, I think, Robin. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
It's great to have
I
you on the show.
really loved being here. I really appreciate all of this.
Well, it was great to have you on the show. It was, it was really insightful. Right.
Awesome. Anytime.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We would like to thank our sponsors, ESTV, NFL Alumni, Corsair, and Gamers. Without their support, we would not be able to bring our weekly show. We also want to thank our moderators here, Catherine and Bayou, and we'll see you all next week.